There are a few subtle differences to our Godot web export, and some are things we can do something about, and some are things that we can't. Some of them just come from being on the web, and some come because Godot uses a slightly different rendering engine to export to the web. Just kind of for technical reasons, some of the tools that Godot uses in usual Godot games aren't available on the web platform. So all the lighting looks a little bit different because it's using this other renderer. You can especially see that on things like the lava that have got emission on them. If you want to see the exact same colors in your web export and in Godot, you can change this rendering engine from Forward Plus, which is the one it uses by default, that's the really nice good one that has nice colors, to Compatibility, which is the rendering engine it uses on the web. When I change this, Godot will ask me to restart, save and restart, and then I should see a slightly different version of my game with the same colors that I can see in the web platform. You can see they're all just a little bit simpler and a little bit brighter, but they're mostly the same as each other. The main big change that you'll notice on the web platform is that my mouse cursor hasn't been captured properly. This will be more obvious if you hadn't added a main menu yet, but the web platform does allow you to capture the mouse cursor if the player has clicked somewhere. So in my version of the game with the main menu scene, I can click on the game before I actually get to playing it. So when we get into the game, my mouse cursor gets captured successfully, but most of you probably won't have that. So what we want to do is make it that the first time somebody clicks in their game, their mouse cursor gets captured. The best place to do that will be in our player script, because you probably already have in your player script an input event, at least checking for mouse motion. My input event also checks for me pressing the left mouse button because I already press it to fire bullets. If you don't yet check for pressing the mouse button, then that's the line to add there. You write input event mouse button and pressed and button index equals button left. And in this block, this is where, especially for the web, I want to write input.mousemode equals input.mousemode captured every time I click when I have a player on the screen. That will ensure that even if the mouse isn't captured at the start, it will be captured after the first time I click. Now right now in my web export, even though I've got this pause menu that works quite nicely, it's still not perfect and it has some similar bugs to it. The first time I click escape, it just gives me back the mouse and I have to click escape twice to get to my pause menu. And then if I click resume, because I've clicked a button, the browser is able to capture my cursor. But if I unpause by clicking escape a second time, well then I've still got the cursor around. So I also need to apply this exact same fix even if I have a pause menu. I have to make sure that when I've clicked into my game, then I capture the mouse again. There is also a slightly nicer bonus fix you can do if you do have a pause menu, which is we can make it that if your mouse leaves the window, then it will pause your game for you. So if for some reason your mouse is not captured, then at least your mouse leaving the window means the game will automatically pause. We can do that in the GameState script by adding another built-in function called notification, func_notification, and then this variable that gets passed to this function called what is which notification Godot is giving us. So there's a built-in notification for telling us that our mouse has left the window. And we can write if what, it's a very weird name for a variable there, equals notification WM for window manager mouse exit, then that means that our mouse has just left the window. Then we can run our pause function. So you'll have a pause function if you've got a pause menu. This just says that we'll run that pause function anytime our mouse leaves the window. Now we don't want to be doing that if we're on our main menu or on our in-game scene. So we're going to copy this exact same block down here into this new if statement, checking that we're not on the main menu level or the very last in-game scene level either. So that block of code is one that you only need if you've already created a pause menu, but it will help us out a little bit. It means that if the mouse leaves the window, then our game will just automatically pause, which is a nice feature to have. The other thing you've probably noticed is that our game freezes quite a bit more often on the web platform. It seems to take a little while to load in if you do have a main menu like this, and then when I'm in the game, every time I do something new, like I shoot a bullet for the first time, or I try to open a chest for the first time, because a new asset is loading, it has a little bit of a pause, but it's significantly worse with that pause when it's dealing with particles. So that's my little flying bits coming out of the chest. That's any time I make an explosion. That's any time the ball goes into the goal. And it's also all the smoke particles that were coming out of my car. It only ever happens the first time it's creating the particles. Basically, it has to draw a thing called a shader for every single particle the very first time it creates one, which is why we can get away with having some particles on the chest, we can get away with having some particles in our explosion, but one thing that we just can't get away with is having 500 smoke particles coming out of our car, especially because I've made the smoke particles quite complicated. So there is something we can do to at least make the smoke particles a bit simpler so that the web platform has a chance to draw them all. Two things I can turn off in my vehicle's smoke particles is I can turn off the turbulence and I can turn off the collision. You can keep them on for the other parts of our smoke particles, but we'll turn off turbulence and collision just when we're in the web platform. And they still look reasonably nice because we've got an initial velocity that's, just show those there, we've got an initial velocity that's sort of making them go in all directions anyway, so we don't really need turbulence on this. And the collision just means that the particles don't go through the car, which you don't usually notice anyway unless you're looking through the dash cam. So we can turn those things off and it's not too bad, but we also don't want to start emitting all of these particles on game load because the game will just freeze right at the start for no good reason. So we're going to start with emitting off still, and we're going to turn on emitting as soon as our car starts losing health. So I'll go to the car script, I'll go to the bit where we're changing the smoke amount ratio, and in here I'll just say if GameState.health, or if you're using an older version of the car, this might just say health is less than 100, then we'll set smoke.emitting to true when and only when our car actually starts losing health. So the very first time your car loses a little bit of health, there'll be a bit of a freeze while the browser creates all of the particles for us to use, and then everything should start working fine. If you want that freeze to be a little bit shorter, you could change from 500 particles to maybe 300 particles. That should still be plenty of smoke particles in our car. So I'll save that, and now let's export our project for web again. I'm going to click Export, Web, Export Project, and then I'll just overwrite my existing sandbox.html, and my browser should just refresh. It'll pick up on the new changes because I've got my live server running, and when I play my game, it shouldn't freeze for any longer at the start of the game, but when I first enter the car and lose some health, we'll have a moment where it loads all the particles in, and then everything just continues to work as normal. While I'm in the car, the other thing that I do notice is a bit awkward sometimes is that you can hear the engine sound kind of buffering every time it repeats. Exit my car. I think that's just an issue with the sound file that the web has picked up on that our normal renderer doesn't pick up on quite so easily. So unfortunately I don't think there's much we can do about that slight kink in the sound file for our car. The final thing that we can try to fix a bit is that if we ever hit these quit buttons, either in our pause menu or our main menu, we can't actually quit the web. It doesn't really mean anything. So all that happens is that our game freezes and it's irreparable and you can't get back to it except by refreshing the page, which we don't really want. So what we're going to do in our web platform is just hide these quit buttons so that nobody clicks them accidentally. And the way to do this in our main menu script is to use a function that Godot has given us to check if we're on the web platform or not, which is if os.hasFeature web. If that's true, that means that we've exported our game to the web. And if that is the case, then we'll just hide our exit button. So I'll go to main menu, I'll grab a reference to my exit button, and then I'll say exit button dot hide. Any time that I'm on the web, then I just won't have any exit button in my game. For the pause menu, rather than remove those buttons altogether, it might be nicer just to go back to the main menu, just like we might have done in the end game scene by setting the GameState.current level back to 0, and then calling GameState.restart level. That's going to be a bit nicer than just hiding the buttons completely. Let's copy those into both of our quit buttons in the pause menu, so now they'll just take us back to the main menu instead of freezing the entire game on the web. And then make sure I've deleted that line there. The only thing that we completely lose on the web platform is my wonderful decals that I'd added to my car. You can see that all the decals have this little exclamation mark, and they say they're just not available in this compatibility renderer. They're only available in the other Godot renderers. But the good thing about Godot being open source is that this might not be the case for too much longer. There's already a pull request to add the fix into the compatibility renderer so that they also render decals. This is one of the benefits of Godot being an open source engine, is that if something isn't working, you're actually just able to go in and fix it yourself, which is what this person has done. And only 1 month ago, somebody's added support to add decals into the compatibility renderer, and you can see it's on the 4.7 milestone. So that means in Godot version 4.7, then you probably will be able to export your game with decals, so there's not too much longer to wait there. So that's our full feature-rich 3D Godot game cleaned up and exported for the web, and it's pretty cool to see all of these things working this well in a browser.